Hi, I'm Mike Bush.
I'm Paul New.
And Colin Sterling. Welcome to Ask the A&Ps from AOPA.
This is the show. Is it really a show? Well, anyway, this is the show where we try to answer your hardest maintenance questions, and once in a while we actually get it right. And when we don't get it right, we get email. So if you'd like to be on the show and have a question, email us at podcasts@aopa.org, and Ian will try to get you on the show.
And after that great introduction, you all will want to follow and subscribe to hear all the wrong answers we come up with wherever you get your podcast.
Speak for yourself, Paul.
We never give wrong answers. We just give guesses. If you'd like to get on our email list for our monthly newsletter and other good stuff, the easiest way to do that is to text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777, and a little email bot will ask you for your name and email address and add you to our mailing list. Again, that's text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777 to put yourself on our list.
So I have a sort of a public service announcement. Yeah. I think the whole show is kind of that, isn't it? All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've been doing a lot of pre-buys and first inspections on 210s. And there's an AD, for those of you that are not Cessna owners or 210 owners, there's an airworthiness directive out for a one-time inspection on the carry-through spar. And this is a giant 56-pound chunk of aluminum that the two wings attach to, and it's in the overhead of the cabin. And the AD also applies to Cardinal, so it's a little broader scope. But my public service announcement is not specifically to these guys. This is just the AD that brought it to my attention. And there are a couple of steps to this AD. One step is you do a visual inspection. The second step is that you do an eddy current inspection of the bottom surface of the spar. And the third part is that the spar has to be completely painted with an epoxy primer or a primer, we'll just say that, and then coated with a corrosion inhibiting compound on the outside, like Corban or AV8, something like that. And what I've seen is the initial visual inspection gets done, and the AD says, the log entry says, AD complied with. Or the AD was complied with and it had the visual and the eddy current, but not the coating reapplied or completed. So the owner doesn't know and just assumes that everything is done. And I get to the airplane and then I'm the bad guy that says, well, no, the coating has to be over the whole thing. And CIC is not the same thing as primer. It has to have both. But it all boils down to now the owner has to pull the headliner down and address this AD a second time. And the worst part of it is getting the headliner down and back up.
Yep. And the plastic.
But more, yeah, exactly. So it's very expensive. And in order to paint the whole thing, you have to take all kinds of stuff apart in the overhead. But even more concerning is that people aren't really reading the AD fully. Helen, as a former language arts teacher, they would call that reading for comprehension. So you have to you have to read the entire AD, not just the first part, and get that done. I'm reminded of an AD that came out in 1972 for Cessnas that said initially you had to take the entire flap, jack screw, and motor assembly out of the wing, clean it, reinstall it, and then you didn't have to take it back out of the wing again, but you had to every 100 hours clean and re-lubricate the jack screw. And I'm not going to remember the details because I don't reread it every other day. I should, though. And then within a certain period of time, you had to install a kit. And the kit was terminating action. I think you had 2 years to get the kit installed. And I still see airplanes coming in that every 100 hours, they're complying with this AD. But you can't comply with the AD because as of 1974, you were required to have terminating action. So they're just not reading paragraph D. They read A, B, and C, but skip D. Anyway, it's a good idea to lubricate those jack screws, but don't say you're complying with the AD because it's terminated.
So on that Cardinal AD, there's a local Cardinal and a local mechanic, and they phoned me panicky, saying the mechanic saying that the AD doesn't apply. He doesn't have to do the eddy current inspection. And
how did he come to that conclusion?
This guy is in my logbook from 40 years ago. He's been working on Cardinals for over 40 years, and be careful. He's an examiner for A&P candidates. And I just want to kindly say he should look at it more carefully. I don't think he listens to this podcast.
He's a designated mechanic examiner, and he says
and so one of the
Oh,
criteria
that's
for
scary.
passing an A&P candidate is you have to be able to read and execute an AD, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
You know
That's
what?
an interesting thing.
What it may be, because there's two ADs that apply to the spars. The first one was for 1978 and older 210s, and it did not include the Cardinal. He may not be aware of the one that came out this last March that is for the 1979 and newer 210 series, all 210s, T210s, P210s, and all of the Cardinals. And it's right in the applicability paragraph at the beginning of the AD. It lists 177s in there.
I think that the Cardinal owner provided him with the AD, said we'd like to comply with the AD this year. So that's
And he said
kind
it
of
didn't
disturbing.
apply?
He said you didn't need eddy current inspection, and he told them that they should take the headliner down because he didn't want to touch it. And they were asking me how to do that, and I said, well, get your screwdriver and say your prayers because it's not been down, and the plastic is original. It's a mess. So
that's the worst part about those all headliners. If they have to come down, or if they have the zippers, I will often.
I don't have a zipper.
Yeah. Well,
so I wanted to ask you, Paul. So how are you being the bad guy on these pre-buys? You're not taking down the headliner on the pre-buy, are you?
No. I'm just looking. It's real easy to look up in there and see if this has been done
without pulling the headliner.
Yeah, without pulling the headliner. Most 210s.
There's a little inspection panel in the back. You can
on the Cardinals.
It's big enough to look through, but it's not big enough to paint through, in other words.
Oh, yeah. And the zippers on the 210s, we have zippers in the headliners if they're original. And I hate those zippers because if you unzip it, it tears the 30-year-old, 40-year-old headliner.
Oh.
So I like to get the owner to open the zippers and to close the zippers. That way, if it tears, it's not on me.
So the moral of the story is, if there's any chance that Paul's going to do a pre-buy on your 210 or Cardinal, then you better paint at least the part of the spar that he can see.
That's right.
Some of these ADs have applicability sections that are so obscure that you need to hire an attorney to parse them. I was very involved with the AD on the twin Cessna exhaust system.
Right.
And the AD on the twin Cessna exhaust system has an initial requirement and then a recurring requirement. And the recurring requirement requires a whole bunch of stuff every 12 years, whereas the initial requirement only has to be done at the first engine overhaul after the exhaust system has accumulated a certain number of hours, 2,200 hours. And so what the AD doesn't make clear, and what we've had big fights about, is if you replace your exhaust system with a new exhaust system, does that reset you back to initial, or are you still subject to this 12-year recurrent? And my position is it reset you back to initial, and all of these IAs in the field are saying, no, we got to do it every 12 years. And I actually reached out to the Wichita ACO, to the guy who was in charge of that AD. He was not the guy who wrote the AD, because he retired, so somebody else is now in charge of the AD. and he agreed with me. He said, no, if you put a new exhaust system in, that resets you back to initial.
Square
But
one, yeah.
it's not obvious. It's one of these things that different people read the AD and come to different conclusions. So it's complicated.
It can be.
And you were talking about multiple steps. The exhaust AD has like,
oh yeah,
paragraphs A through G, all with
yeah.
different compliance times. It's really complicated.
It's
AD.
a mess, yeah.
Paul, how come the Cessna 195s don't have an 80 against their carry-through spar?
It's a totally different design, but they did have an AD on the 195 spar back in the 60s. I think there's only 4 ADs on the 195s.
Wow.
But if they're not inspecting those spars, they'll have the same problem. But I think the big problem with the Cardinal and the 210 is moisture and corrosion. And a lot of it had to do,
With
like on
those,
the Cardinal,
ducts.
with the air ducts going through. On the 210, it was the foam pad that was glued to the bottom of the spar with hydroscopic glue. And maybe the 195 doesn't have any of that. I don't ever get to work on a 195. I haven't worked on a 195 since I was in grade school. So they're really neat airplanes.
For my A&P check ride with the other examiner in San Diego, not the first one I was mentioning, the practical thing I had to do was troubleshoot a brake on a 195 that was coming in for work with this guy. He said, hey, let's go check out this 195. And we went out there and crawled through it and looked brake loose. It was awesome.
Did you get into the pivoting main gear, the crosswind?
That was an option.
I don't remember that.
I don't think that would have anything to do with the brakes. Yeah.
It was a loose fitting. We found a leak, but it was kind of fun to crawl around and look inside the floor.
It's a big airplane, heavy, big airplane. It's built like, you say, this thing will never get off the ground.
When I was a kid, I used to sit up. Sam Gladney, a friend of ours in El Dorado, Arkansas, had a couple of 195s, and I would go. I loved opening the doors because you went in basically the back seat and went up to the front, and I would sit there, and I thought I was in some kind of airliner or something. That was so cool.
Yeah.
So getting back to the Cardinal Wingspar AD, because there's a little thread creep here. The only reason that the AD applies to 177s is because its carry through is basically the same design as the 210, right? Because there's never been a failure in a 177. This whole mess started with
the 210s.
210 that was that was doing low level pipeline patrol in extreme turbulence
and high G turns at the end of their grid patterns.
So presumably the 177 would never have been affected by the AD, except that they determined somehow that it had the same design.
Guilty by association.
Yeah. We ran into that same problem again with the twin Cessna spar strap thing, where the only airplanes that ever had a failure were 402Cs. But because the 414 had the same spar design, it got caught up in the AD, even though there's never been a failure in a 414. There never will be a failure because it has a totally different load characteristic. The 402 has a huge cabin, and the 414 has 6 seats or something. So it would never in a million years have a failure, but because it had a common design, we couldn't talk the FAA out of including the 414.
Well, it's a good thing that they included the Cardinal after seeing the ones that were found. Obviously, had not actually been inspected in years. The corrosion.
But you said most of the problems you see were mechanics driving screws.
Well, that's on the new AD. And from the P210s in particular. So the P210 is a totally sealed up cabin. You're not going to have moisture particularly. So the damage is mechanical damage from people It sounds
Try and
terrible.
get that
but
headliner back in.
Get that headliner back in. Well, let's drill a hole here and we can put a screw in this hole.
in there.
By golly,
Oh my
that'll hold it.
God.
Got to find a stud, So,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Cardinal, it's a good thing that they were checked because a lot of them were just horrendous.
Wow.
Yeah,
So,
we've seen a lot of unauthorized holes in lower spark caps and stuff.
Yeah. Our first question is from Justin, who's ready to get out the wire strippers. Go ahead, Justin. What's up?
All right. So this is more of an expansion on a recent question several episodes back on owner-produced parts. And you guys were talking at length about a Cessna hinge in that episode. But I have questions that relate more specifically to electronic components. Electronic components frequently go end of life and create all sorts of headaches, and especially in the case of a certified airplane. Garmin recently has pulled some of its GNS support. Although they have, replacement options available, there are other systems, especially on Part 23 certified planes, where we're relying more and more on electronics. So what is the burden placed on an owner-produced part for things that are more in like this black magic realm of electronics? For an example, I own and fly a Columbia 400, which I know, Paul, you affectionately refer to us as those Columbia guys. But the propeller heat timer on there is one that's known to not be available. And even if I could get the print of the original, those internal components are not at all possible to obtain. I have since, asking this question, done a little more research and found Advisory Circular AC20-62 Echo. And that talks specifically about components that can be replaced and some that can't. And the ones that can't are things that are programmable and contain software or any specific application type components. So what is an owner like me to do when you can't source any of these things, and the world of electrons is black magic to everybody, including probably most of the FAA field approvers?
Including the FAA guys. You just had to toss that in, didn't you? That kind of talk gets us in trouble sometimes. So the Moritz prop heat timer is an issue, and I know where there might be some, so I might help you out with that.
Smugglers.
But yeah, it's a potted device, so even if you take it apart, you're probably going to destroy it. You can't figure it out. So reverse engineering is very difficult. I don't have a good answer for that, other than it is
used parts, right?
It is, used parts is about all you can get. And there's not
there's
a
a
whole lot of
limited supply.
Columbias. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of Columbias in the salvage yards.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of Columbias, period.
Some of the manufacturers of those parts anyway. So,
or pray for aftermarket.
There's an alternate strategy, which is to design your own timer and then try to convince Paul or some other IA that it's a minor alteration.
Which is something I probably could do. I am an electrical engineer for an aviation company by trade. So it does fall in my skill set, but I'm just kind of curious if there's any extra hurdles aside from equivalency.
The chances of getting a field approval, I think, it's pretty difficult nowadays. It's much harder to get field approvals nowadays than it used to be, because the FAA has issued guidance on that says that really limits the ability of inspectors in the FSDO to issue field approvals without kicking it up to the aircraft certification office or something like that.
So finding its way to being a minor alteration on a non-required equipment is kind of what I have to cross my fingers that it lives within.
Well, that would be the most frictionless approach if you can pull it off.
Are we back to the frictionless world discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. We always try to minimize friction.
That's right.
Getting the FSDO involved usually increases friction.
Yeah.
And entropy.
You could just bypass the timer and just turn the heat on and off, just have a switch. But then you run the risk
of minor
leaving it on. No, that.
I
don't know. It's not a Fiki airplane. So
seems to me if you put it on a switch and that's a minor alteration, then putting it on a homebrew timer wouldn't be any greater alteration than that.
I think you could
I don't
probably.
Think that's a minor alteration.
I don't think it's a minor alteration, but you might find the right guy to do a field approval.
I mean, major and minor is in the eye of the beholder. If you look at Part
That's
43,
true.
Appendix
Some
A,
definitions.
you probably won't find anything about propeller
Electronics.
heat timers in the
Yeah.
list of things that the FAA is saying. It's a close call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is going to be real frustrating because it's a very valid point that these are not, 57 Chevys where everything is mechanical and you can fabricate everything out in the field. There's a lot of things that you just can't easily duplicate in the shop. We've got a PC board on a switch panel from a Cirrus. They had one of the lands fried due to a diode failure on the battery number 2 relay. Well, it's a simple thing in the avionics world. I would have just duplicated that. It'd been no problem. But for an owner, that would have been a significant effort to do that. Had it fried any components, now you have to go find components.
Yep.
Fortunately, the Cirrus is current production, but on a Columbia, you'd have a hard time duplicating that.
Right.
Yeah, my particular Columbia also happens to be of the 12-volt variety, so
that
limits my pool.
Is this a 300 then?
No, it's a 400. It's a
Is
2005.
It, 2005. Okay,
I have 4 serial numbers before they switched to 28 volts.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, you're right that the discrete components and even non-programmable ICs are considered to be standard parts, and you have a lot of flexibility there. But if it's a programmable IC or a microprocessor or something, then it's not considered a standard part. And if you replace it with something else, you better not log it.
That is one way to do it. Yeah.
I will never admit to that.
Not a good way.
Sometimes the only way.
Hey, I want it noted. I was not the one that came up with that idea. just for once, it was not me.
Yeah,
I had an FAA inspector tell me that one time, and I never forgot it. He said, Mike, you really shouldn't do that. And if you do it, for God's sake, don't log it. And I thought, I'm going to file. That sounds like good advice. I'm going to file up.
How would anybody ever figure it out if you did that? I mean,
they probably wouldn't. That's the.
Yeah.
I guess if there were a crash due to that, the NTSB would be digging and maybe they'd figure it out. But
they probably wouldn't get that far.
I had a friend back in the 70s. He was a mechanic, and he bought one of the kits for the magnetic compass from Aircraft Spruce or somebody, and put the kit in, logged it in the logbook and the whole bit. Didn't think anything of it. Probably done it 100 times before. And a student came in and was getting his check ride. So the FAA is looking through the logbooks, sees the logbook entry, and had a beginner inspector with him. The beginner inspector saw it, decided, this is a violation because he's broken into an instrument. So they sent the mechanic a letter, and the old guy inspector made a visit to the mechanic and said, look, I couldn't stop it from happening. I'm sorry. And we know that everybody does this, but for goodness sakes, don't put it in the logbook.
Don't log it.
It occurs to me if this prop heat timer is potted, and if you design your own prop sync timer,
nobody would know
it. and if by some chance you peeled the sticker off of the old one and pasted it on the new one, who's gonna know?
And again, not me making the suggestion.
Saying that you should do this, understand, but we're just trying to explore the various options here because we feel your pain.
I appreciate the insight. It's probably going to be a growing concern as more of these electromechanical systems make their way into newer planes. So
yes,
interesting that when Mike says something like that, it's considered insight. When Paul says something like that, Colleen says it's something else.
Well, Paul, you're the avionics expert guy too. So and the Columbia guy. So you didn't really have a solution. The Mike's
Paul, I've
solution
relied
was
on your
a-
insight when my starter adapter went out. So
Oh, okay, good.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Excellent. Excellent.
I try to stay out of areas where it's obvious that I might know something and get
Yeah.
myself in trouble.
Trouble.
Owner-produced starter adapter is probably not a good idea.
It's
But-
probably not.
Owner-produced starter adapters. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, that was great, Justin.
Yeah, excellent
Yeah.
question. We appreciate that call for
Love,
sure.
love the studio voice. Come back anytime, please.
all right, thank you.
And I
Thanks,
love
Justin.
your T-shirt too. I have a slide like that when I teach my DC electrical class, and none of the students ever get it. You know, it says one atom's talking to another, and it says, "I lost an electron," and the other atom said, "Are you positive?" Question mark. I mean, it's pretty basic. But
That's
I
it.
just talked about what's going on at the atomic level, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and they never get it. And I'm just like, okay, I guess it's not funny if you're just not following.
It is funny.
It's funny.
It's
The burden of being an electrical engineer, I kind of have to wear
yeah.
it proudly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like
proudly
it.
do so. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right.
Justin.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks. Take care.
Our next question is from Ben, who's a new aircraft owner with new aircraft owner questions. What's up, Ben?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I purchased
Hey.
a 1978 Piper Warrior last year. Came with a fresh annual. I've noticed there have been a number of things deferred, not done over the last probably decade before I bought it. That once completed just makes the plane operate so much better. Some of the things like new engine air filter, vacuum system air filter, seals around the windows, new spark plugs, greasing, lubing the heater and defrost cables, and brake servicing, kind of among others. Recently got it painted, and during the teardown and strip process, a mechanic on the field performed an annual and stated a lot of the work that he did were just fundamental little things that showed some deferment or neglect. And just wanted to figure out, between the experts that y'all are, what would y'all advise as the owner can do maybe over the next year leading into a little more comprehensive annual, or is there anything y'all would urgently do now?
Well, the things that you've mentioned are all just routine things that come up at every annual. Filters.
Well, actually, most of what he mentioned are preventive maintenance items that you can
Right.
do
Yeah.
yourself.
Just
Yeah.
Right.
basic
Pretty
stuff
simple.
that you could do.
That
So
could do. Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't call those deferred items. I think you're going to deal with filters every year. Yeah. Well, I mean, they could have been, it depends on how bad the filter looked. But the nice thing is you've got it. You said it's a Warrior, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Warriors are great because incredibly simple. But the main things that you want to look for are corrosion issues at the wing attachments, the forward and the aft wing attachments, in particular the aft, because they have steel parts bolted to aluminum parts where the wings attach to a carry-through. And there's a steel plate riveted to the aft wing spar and steel plates riveted to the carry-through spar. And there's a service bulletin for the older airplanes. That's a really good place to look. And the reason you want to look there is it's if you catch it really early, you can prevent all sorts of maintenance headaches. But I think other than that, on a Warrior, the normal Cherokee checklist does pretty well. You can even use FAR 43 Appendix D, as basic as that is, and that's a really low bar. But I think that catches pretty much everything that you would need to find on a Warrior.
I would think in general, deferred maintenance is bad when it's the kind of stuff that if you let it go too long, it's going to become very expensive.
Right.
And it could be anything from if something's loose or wearing and eggs out a hole, or
No,
the
Wallers
holes go-
out. a hole.
wallers out the
Wallers
hole.
out.
It's need to be bushed, and it's going to need machine work or replacing that part altogether. It's something that if you just put a bigger bolt in or caught it before, something got really worn, you could avoid structural replacement that you'd need to do down the road. So those wing attach points, that sounds like very specific to your model and really great advice, and something that you can just clean the corrosion off and prevent it from getting out of control down the road.
Yeah.
So that's
another thing on the Cherokees are the stabulator pivots in the back. You want to check those for looseness, and you can catch those early. It's not terribly expensive to deal with, but lubrication, you mentioned that. As an owner, get out. There's a lubrication chart for the airplane in the service manual. Get out that chart and lubricate everything. I find some of the biggest problems are caused by just lack of routine attention with lubrication. And there's so the lubrication chart will tell you all the different greases to use, and it'll give. You don't have to use those exact greases, but you have to use, instead of greases, I'll say lubricants that meet the same specification. And there will be one that's called out. It's mil spec 7870B, 7870B. It's just a light duty oil. Don't use it. But go find some sort of good spray lube like LPS 1 or 2, or my favorite is Tri-Flow, which is a Teflon lubricant.
Yeah, Tri-Flow is great.
It is. Mooney uses it for all the external rod ends on their flight controls because it sticks really well. It's a good penetrant, and it will certainly meet the spec of 7870B. So anywhere it calls for that, my motto is, if it moves, squirt it with something. And just keep it well lubricated. The piano hinge on your trim tab on the back, just drizzle a little bit along there, and on your aileron hinges, the same thing, especially if it's stored outdoors. You'll be surprised at what a huge difference that can make.
Yeah, that's not expensive.
And lubricating,
lubricating
anything is categorized as preventive maintenance that an owner can do.
And the only thing you could do wrong is maybe use a lubricant that attracts dirt more than lubricates, and that could cause problems down the road. Like LPS 3 is really sticky.
Yeah, don't use that
stuff. Yeah, but this light stuff we're talking about, it's just trying to keep things moving.
Yeah.
I mean, you can also lubricate control cable, right? That's another thing that gets sticky with time. Anything with a rod end or any place where you have two parts moving against each other is a great candidate for a rattle can of something.
Tri-Flow is a very good choice. That's what all the motorcycle guys use.
Oh yeah,
on the cables and stuff like that. Is Tri-Flow.
Yeah, bicycle people use it on chains. That's where I found it first. But all sorts of things that can be lubricated that often don't. Pulleys, cable pulleys, they all have sealed bearings, and they were sealed like 10 years ago, but they weren't, they're not sealed anymore because they're old. So, and if you miss, the best part, if you're like 3 feet away from the pulley and you're spraying and you miss, it doesn't hurt anything. You can lubricate the cables. They're good too. It's all, don't worry about having good aim.
And the best part about lubrication is, as a new airplane owner, it forces you to look really closely at all the different places in your airplane, and you'll learn what, when you move this control, it's this cable that's moving, and it goes over a pulley here, and you'll do a lot of snooping, and you'll eventually look in all these places that you would normally look.
Yeah, you're talking about air filters, and generally the manuals call for replacing various kinds of air filters on a timetable, once a year, or every 500 hours or whatever. I wouldn't panic if that went over, because most of these times that are in the book are based on kind of the worst case airplane, and to flying in dirty conditions and stuff like that. So there's no big problem going over those times. But if the time on the filter is unknown, or the last time it was done was in the previous century or something, then it's probably a good idea to change the filter just on general principles.
Great airplane,
that's
though.
right.
That's a good start.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a simple airplane, easy to work on.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
What year model is it?
It was 1978.
78. So my director of maintenance, Blake, bought a very similar airplane to get his private in, and he's learned all the same stuff, and he's an A&P IA and been around the industry for a while. So when he rolled the airplane in, he did a lot of the same stuff that you're doing. He just started opening things up and exploring. And yes, he could do more maintenance than you can legally, but basically as an owner, he did all the very same stuff that you're going to be doing, just poking around, seeing what's there, spraying, squirting stuff,
Cleaning.
keeping
cleaning
it well
things.
lubricated.
Hey, Paul, I got a question for you. When Piper decided to rivet steel plates onto an aluminum spar, what did they do to inhibit dissimilar metals corrosion? They put some kind of special coatings on those things before they rivet them, and
the steel plates were painted black, and I don't know that it was any kind of special paint. And the spars and all that, some were primed, and some were not. But that's why it's the subject of a service bulletin, is that they have had a lot of corrosion issues. And so the bulletin came out, and I'm not sure that it applies to a 78 model. But anyway, you had to make an inspection panel in the floor of the baggage area so you could get to this, take the plate out, clean it up, install new plate, prime, coat it with AV8. That was actually my first introduction to AV8.
that sounds like a pretty big job.
It can be if you find corrosion. If you don't find corrosion, it's not a big deal.
What kind of rivets do you use to rivet a steel plate to an aluminum spar?
Just standard rivets. Yeah,
they're aluminum rivets.
Yeah, standard rivets.
I'll be darned.
Standard AD rivets. And the bulletin is on the aft wing attach point, but you have very similar construction at the forward wing attach point. So I always recommend people check that as well. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Lubricate.
Invest in a mirror and a flashlight and a rag.
And a borescope.
And a borescope. Yeah.
Yep.
Borescope can help you
absolutely
look at all
got
those
one
places.
last Christmas.
Oh, no kidding.
Right.
Now
Another
that
Christmas
is
present.
that is a great
Very nice.
aviator's Christmas present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Well, I
New
appreciate
plane
your
and new
thoughts. Thank
borescope.
you for having me on, and thank you for the wisdom. And I'll go get some lubricant and start spraying it all over.
Rock on.
Okay, and next time you're on the show, make sure you're doing it from inside your airplane.
That's right.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks for the call, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fun.
Okay, it's time for letters, which most of us enjoy. I'm not sure, Paul, how you feel about them, but somebody questioning your expertise.
People question my expertise all the time. All the time.
All right. So the first one deals with, let's see, I think it was the Mooney tack where they had maybe two different times. So I think it was like a JPI versus the mechanical.
And we said use the slowest time.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right. That's
use
exactly
the
right.
one that was best. Yeah.
Yep. So he said he has the exact scenario. He's got no, I'm sorry. The caller didn't have a Mooney. This guy's a Mooney. So this is from Ben. He said, my 1967 Mooney, the tack reads about 1,000 RPM lower than the stock gauge. As a tiebreaker.
1,000. Wow.
No, sorry, that's me.
Maybe 100.
Yeah, 100. Yep.
100.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
right.
that makes a lot more sense. He downloaded the an iPhone app called Strobe Tachometer, and it uses the phone camera at a selectable frame rate to freeze the prop blades corresponding to the selected RPM. So you aim the phone app through the windshield in flight, and then it values it to match it to the JPI across the entire range of in-flight settings. He said just something for people to try and he finds it to be accurate.
That's
very
cool.
accurate.
That's going to really cut down on the prop tack business. Now there's an app for that. I like that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to Velcro your phone up on the dash, though.
What was the name of the app,
Study.
Ian?
It's called Strobe Tachometer.
Oh, very
Strobe
cool.
tachometer.
I got to download that.
Why did we not already know this?
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
I'll have to go download that.
Yeah,
Okay, and this one's
Nice.
from Steve. This is about the Cessna 152 with oil pooling. You remember he had bought this airplane. I think his wife was learning to fly in it. And so he said a question was addressed regarding the gentleman who had a 152 that was fouling the bottom cylinders 2 and 4.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't hear anyone recommend checking the mag for those plugs. Is it possible that a weak mag could cause those plugs from firing well enough to keep the normal oil consumption burned off? Obviously, the top plugs on 1 and 3 would not exhibit the same issue. When troubleshooting two problems occurring on a piece of equipment, I always look for what is common between the two. Just a thought from an old mechanic. That's from Steve.
It's excellent troubleshooting skills.
Yep.
Look for what's common. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Is that something
Tell
that
you,
I don't remember
weak
if you guys
mag.
mentioned that as a possible scenario or not, a possible solution or not?
All. Mags firing weakly. I mean, you could have a bad coil, but they don't normally just go weak. They just don't.
What
They
about if the
crack
timing
and fail.
changes?
Yeah. Well, if the
Internal timing.
if the internal timing was off, then the mag would not put out full voltage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
That's why we check it every 500 hours, preferably.
Yep.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Good,
that's
okay.
a good idea.
Good. And this is my favorite. This might be my favorite letter yet. This is from Kelly. Colleen made the comment on a recent podcast that Mike's text number sounded like a prime number. It is not. Remember, this was Mike.
Yes.
Oh.
337.
Oh, it's
Snappy
not a
text.
prime? Oh, the
Yes.
387, whatever
It's
it is.
not.
Really?
He said,
Divisible by what?
well, so she said Mike noted that it was odd, so that had a chance to be prime. She said, here's a little trick to determine if an odd number is a prime number or not. Add the digits of the number. If the sum is divisible by a prime number, then it's not prime. In this case, the number is 33777,
Right.
which apparently equals 27, which is divisible by the
27.
prime number 3. Hence, it's not prime.
Oh, amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. I love
I
it.
wonder
love
how you
that.
prove that theorem. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
There's probably
that
a
is.
name for that theorem somehow.
That has got to be my favorite. That's
Have to ask
Ian's
the bubbleheads at work.
conjecture is what it's called.
Ian's conjecture.
I'm going to find out what theorem that is. There's a name
Yeah.
for it, I'm sure.
That's so cool.
The funny things that we learn.
So it's
Mhm.
not prime. Oh well.
That was Kelly.
Kelly.
Yeah, it's Kelly's
Thank you.
Thanks,
conjecture.
Kelly. Yep.
Kelly's
I love it
conjecture.
when
We're going to
A
give
woman
Kelly
is
that one
smarter
for
than
now.
all the old farts.
Yeah.
I love it.
Put together.
Including me. Our next question is from David, who had quite a stressful experience. Why don't you tell us the story, David?
Thanks, Colleen. Well, while flying an approach into a coastal Florida airport, I was several miles out over the water and at 1,600 feet. I lost engine power. So it was an abrupt loss of power, and I immediately began doing all the things I was trained to do. I pitched for glide. I made sure the fuel pump was on, which it was. I was trying to land. Switched the fuel tanks. Mixture of it was, went to full, no change. Throttle went to full, back. I could tell they were connected, but nothing was changing. So when I talked to ATC, they were kind enough to let me know there was a beach up ahead that I could land on. So
As if you didn't already know that.
I could
Oh
see
my
it,
God.
but yeah, they didn't give me clearance, but they did let me know it was there. So while troubleshooting, I've got one of the older UBG16 engine monitors. I've also got a JPI fuel flow meter. And I did have fuel flow. I had 12 GPH, and I noticed the EGTs were hot. Really hot, higher than I've ever seen them. Like the TIT was showing like 1650, but the CHTs were all normal, like 350. So while I'm kind of looking at everything, trying to come up with a plan here, the engine did get power for just for a second, but it lost it. And I knew I wasn't going to make the airport. So I was getting ready to make the turn at the beach. I was about 500 feet as I turned to line up for the beach. And while I was descending through 400 feet, preparing to land, I got a stall warning. I'd rather not discuss why that happened, but
What kind of airplane is this?
It's a Piper
What
Lance.
airplane?
Piper Lance? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And yeah, so I naturally that stall warning, I had been distracted, so I pitched forward abruptly, and that may have saved the plane because I got full power and more since I had throttle full forward, mixture full forward. I had more power than I normally have at sea level. So I climbed straight up to 1,200 feet and talked to ATC. I asked for a 180 and a short approach to the airport, and everything was normal.
Wow.
I mean, I
It's
flew to
clear
the
to
airport.
land any runway, right?
Yeah, they were great. They said I could have whatever I wanted, and I was, other than the strange feelings that come with an off airport on beach landing, everything was fine. Landed normally, taxied normal. All the temps were normal, and when I got on the ground, did a mag check. Everything seemed fine.
Huh.
So I was fortunate because there was a great mechanic on the field that took and agreed to take on the issue and said they were, everything had to be checked. So we started with the fuel tanks. They were pristine. The fuel servo, sent that off. It was nearly perfect. And then the mags, well, in this plane, the dual mag, that was the issue. So he reported that all I heard was a spring, and I had sent a picture of this. A spring had failed in the mag and had chewed up some of the internals of that. And there's the picture. That little chunk on the rotor there is the little piece of what I was told was a spring. And
looks like a tooth.
Yeah, well,
It looks like a gear tooth. Yeah.
It does, but I should have sent a different picture. It's just a little thin piece of metal. But anyway, new mags in the plane, and I've flown another 65 hours, and she's been great. My thought is that little chunk of spring got wedged in between the rotor and the case and delayed the timing back to whatever the starting timing is. I assume TDC on this mag, and possibly the abrupt pitch down that put me light in the seat may have allowed that little chunk to jump out of that mag and restore normal operation. But I can't really find anybody to tell me if that is a sound assessment of what happened, and I thought maybe you guys would know.
Well, the impulse coupling is sort of external to the mag. There's no way that metal could
And that's the
move
spring.
from the impulse coupling into the mag.
Does this one have an impulse coupling? It's a Piper.
Yeah, because there's an AD that I have to, because it's got the rivets versus
the springs. Yeah, the snap.
There isn't any such thing as a shower of sparks dual mag, is there? I don't think so.
No, there may not be. Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked on these.
This reminds me of an article I wrote a while back, the title of which was "Is 1.5 mags enough?" I'm convinced that the DMAG should never have been certified. It may have, some guy in the FAA must have decided that it met the letter of the regulation, but it sure doesn't meet the spirit of the regulation.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
Independent.
Yeah, we have recovered quite a few airplanes in the past and rebuilt a Mooney. Gosh, back when I was 17 or 18, that had a problem with the dual mag, and a piece from one side of one mag decided to go to the other mag and destroy both of them because there's not a divider between the two. Yeah.
Now, also, Lycoming's had a terrible problem with the clamps that secure the mag to the accessory case.
Yep.
They're on their third generation of clamp now.
Yep.
And if the clamp slips and the mag rotates, it takes both of them at a time, not just one. So
it screws them both up. But I don't see how a piece of debris, it wouldn't have taken it back to its basic timing. I think it definitely would have slowed it down and screwed up the timing, but it wouldn't take it to its start timing.
Yeah, and looking at the graph, I mean, to me, it looks like the engine was still firing. It was just sending all the power out the exhaust rather than
ETTs
trying to
don't go to zero. Yep.
Yeah. Are we sure that the mag didn't slip? That the clamps didn't come loose?
The clamps were tight. They are the current generation clamps that have they kind of have like a clover shape or something. They have a little a differentiating shape, so you can tell. And it was in the correct position. Obviously, after whatever happened, where I had power restored, I had great power. Everything flew fine. So I was just trying to decipher what happened during that unfortunate period.
Have you flown it since?
65 hours worth. With a
That must
different
have
Mac.
taken some guts to get back in when you weren't quite convinced that was the problem, right?
I tell you, everybody asked me about it, and when I did my private training, I had a flight instructor that was just hammered the emergency procedures, and made me. One of the things he did was made me do emergency procedures for I remember training and taking the trainer down to just a couple 100 feet off the ground over the beach. We had an island out where we trained, so it wasn't like a occupied beach. And I've credited him with me not being too worked up during the process, because it wasn't a sight picture that I hadn't seen before. I was literally just preparing the next step.
It was only a sight picture you hoped never to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I was shutting mags
out of
off.
curiosity, did you declare an emergency?
I'm
sure ATC declared one for you.
Correct. No, I did not say the words, but yeah, it was that I made. I probably did two things that, maybe next time if I had more time, I would think it through. One is actually say Mayday. And the second, which in this case, I do believe the stall or the stall warning, I'm convinced that is what saved me. I was at 1,600 feet, so I just pitched forward. I thought I'd hold this while I worked the checklists, and having lost power, I think it wasn't really that long, just a couple of minutes. I had gradually lost the forward force on that yoke, and when I turned, I didn't stall in a turn, thankfully, but when that stall warning sounded, that was because I had not trimmed for glide, and I was just thinking I would hold it. So that was a good takeaway. But I'm afraid that had I not had that stall where I responded with a hard pushover, that plane may have been on the beach and certainly not around anymore.
ATC would have had to fill out a whole lot more paperwork. I'm sure they're really glad that you made it to the airport. I'm still struggling to figure out what spring it could have been.
Yeah, that's not really a spring.
There's no spring inside.
Yeah. So when they did the teardown of the magnetos, the 1.5 magnetos.
Sure.
Did they find any damage to the magnetos themselves?
No.
The plastic gears were not damaged.
The
distributor gears.
Yeah.
I believe they replaced those with new, because it was
Sure.
it essentially was.
There wasn't a distributor gear missing a tooth. Those things are made of nylon.
None of them were fractured or anything.
No, that piece of metal on there. Again, I apologize. I thought I didn't think about taking a picture from the side, but it was just like a little thin.
I wonder if it could be the springy, the sheet metal spring on the points assembly that somehow came off. That's the only thing I can think of.
I can't imagine that doing that sort of damage, even if it got wedged in there. I don't know. I guess it could.
I don't know. A piece of metal floating around inside a mag could do some
all
really
sorts
strange
of stuff.
things. Yeah, because it's conductive.
Yep. Well, that's true. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure it did something mechanical. It might have done something electrical.
That would make more sense.
Another question everybody asked me is, well, how many hours were on that mag? It had 470 hours since its last IRAM.
Of course.
So everybody says, oh, you should have done it. You should have had that mag checked out at 500 hours. Well, it would have been at this year's annual, but
sure.
It wasn't.
I wonder if this is something that would have been caught even.
I don't know.
Well, I love the plane, and I'm going to. There are a few options now to address this concern with some replacement equipment. So I am. I have it on the wish list.
Well, the new dual electronic ignition.
Well,
Yeah, which they
the
have
only
options now.
the only one that I think has an option for
Is electro air. Yeah.
is the electro air system.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
that's got some issues as well. So
Yeah.
there's no.
I'm monitoring that discussion.
Yeah.
So
Good.
real
Yeah.
important here. Did you keep the part?
Yes, I have
Okay.
the rotor and the case, and it will become artwork for the office.
Absolutely. Okay. That's very important.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Even the little piece of metal.
Did you get, just out of curiosity, did you get a follow-up contact from the FISDO or anything asking?
I did. I spoke with a nice
Yeah.
gentleman from the local FISDO.
Okay, so that's a normal thing that gets triggered if with an emergency.
And
Yeah.
he was great.
They just have
asked
they just have paperwork to fill out.
Yeah, he just wanted to know that I think the bottom line is he wanted to make sure I wasn't flying the plane until it had been signed off as
Mhm.
by a qualified
Oh,
individual.
as safe. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Which of course it was.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, we're glad you're here to tell the story.
I'm glad
Yeah.
to be here, and
Mhm.
I never thought I wouldn't be.
I'm sorry that the mag was the last thing they check after you sent the servo out and all that
Yeah.
stuff. You know, it always seems to be that
But
way.
yeah.
But I
it's
would have.
logical.
I would have. Well, they wanted to change all 6 cylinders too. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you've been a listener, haven't you?
Oh yeah, no, I love
Yeah,
the show,
no,
guys.
he just wanted to double the length of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I do appreciate your input. And
Wow.
yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be able to participate in this call, and hope to fly this plane for many years to come.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Sounds
for pushing our buttons.
Yeah, you did
Right.
everything right. So glad you're
Good
okay,
job.
David.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Take
Take
care.
care.
See you, David.
See you.
Our next question is from Ray. He used an in-flight mag check to help diagnose a problem. Good job, Ray. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Ray Landis. So I've got a Cessna T210N. So it's a 1979 210. I've had it since 1999. I flew it for 10 years with a TSIO 520. And then in 2012, I replaced that motor. I was 300 hours past TBO with a Larry Vitito's conversion. It's a turbo normalized IO 550. Which is a magnificent motor, but it has, I think, different magnetos than the previous motor. So it's got pressurized mags. And over the subsequent almost now 10 years I've had that motor, I've managed to go through 3 magnetos. I went through a couple in close succession in 2016, and the failure pattern was different on those 2 failures, but they were in close succession, which might be a cautionary tale. And then the last time I lost one was coming back from Canada in August. Of course, it's the last leg. I'm crossing the border, and I'm at 10,000 feet with a 210 pilot sitting next to me. We lean the engine to lean a peak, and it's a little rough. It just doesn't feel real normal. And so I did an in-flight mag check and determined that one of the magnetos was operating, but clearly wasn't as smooth as the other. So my decision was to stay on both and go to Richard Peak and to continue my flight trying to get back into the US. I didn't want to land somewhere in Canada with a bad magneto. And then ultimately it got even rougher. And I, again, did an in-flight mag check, Richard Peak now. And the mag that was rough was very rough. So I just stayed on one magneto and completed my flight into the US and landed at my home airport. So, I've thought a lot of, having gone through 3 magnetos. So 3 questions. One, when I lost the magneto, did I do the right thing? Was it an emergency? Should I have just, landed in Canada? Question 2, was my management of the failed magneto proper? Should I have stayed on the good mag or stayed on 2 mags? or whatever, Rich Peak, Lena Peak. And then finally, what do I do now? I know what I've done is I've replaced the failed magneto with a conventional magneto. But I'm wondering if, without you guys quick picking winners and losers, with the electronic products that are out there in a turbocharged installation, do I just keep flying the old-fashioned stuff, or do I think about something electronic?
Well, my first thought is I think your in-flight troubleshooting prowess was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And your procedures were fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wouldn't have landed in Canada either. I would have. So
fly on the
obviously
good
been
mag.
doing a
Just
lot of
like-
soul searching about that. But it sounds to me like you did exactly the right thing.
Absolutely.
And I hate pressurized magnetos. They're just a bad idea. They suffer greatly from contamination and moisture and corrosion and stuff. Normal mags, you need to open them up every 500 hours. Pressurized mags should really be opened up every 100 hours. They're just terrible. So if you could replace your mags with a dual SureFly installation, I would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. One of the problems with the 550 conversions, just like a Cirrus, to put mags on it like Mike has.
You can't put big mags on it.
You can't put the big mags on it. That would be a phenomenal solution.
And that's probably what you had on your 520.
Yes. Yeah,
Big
more than
tractor
likely.
mags.
But big tractor mags. That's right. But the SureFly, I think, is a very good option. I have one SureFly, and I'm contemplating replacing and going to two SureFlies. The on your airplane, the downside
they don't need to be pressurized because they don't have a distributor.
They do not. Well, yeah, they don't have a distributor in the same sense. There is some thought that they may need, may have a problem at really high altitudes, but I've not seen any data to support that. Just
Why would
some
that
anecdotal people. Well, maybe arcing in the cap, where the spring contacts are and that sort of thing. But it's just been a couple people making comments. So I haven't seen anything from Jason at SureFly or any actual data to support it. So, but I think something like that would be a great idea. They fit perfectly in there. You're not going to use the advanced timing feature. You will have to have a second battery for the second SureFly. That's where some of the expense will come in.
But it's well, not so little, but it's a medium-sized NiCad thing or nickel metal hydride battery or something. That
a lot less maintenance.
No, maybe it's probably lithium ion.
I think
it mounts to the firewall.
The one that we saw at Oshkosh.
Yeah,
is
that's
probably the one.
That's the one that's called out in the STC, I think.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, Ray, when you switched to the one mag, did you pay much attention to the TITs?
Not in turbine inlet temperature. I mean, when I lost my first magneto years ago in 2016, I was given a kind of a demo flight to family members, flying them around northern Michigan.
Oh, that's a great time to lose a mag.
Right, and all the EGTs went up.
Sure,
that's what they're supposed to do.
Well, and I don't pay attention to EGTs. I look at CHTs, and I was busy, and I landed on an island, and I didn't discover that I had a bad mag till I did my mag check and I got a backfire, which I think I've heard Mike talk about how that happens. And I left the plane and didn't try to take off with one magneto.
Smart.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Well, so the reason I asked the question is if you lose a magneto on a non-turboed airplane, it just doesn't mean anything. You can fly around all day on one magneto. The engine relaxes. There's no detonation problems. All that, you're making less power, which is why you solve all these other problems. But on your turbocharged engine,
you have to watch
you have to watch the TITs or TIT singular on your airplane. and EGTs are a good indicator as well, because they're going to go up. If you're as aware of what's going on as you were, and you were incredibly aware of everything, the next time this happens, so, you may want to do something to lower the TIT if that shoots up past 1700 or so, if you're going to fly for a period of time.
Of course, he did do something. He went full rich.
Well, right. But I mean, to notice the TIT and make sure that you're bringing
You
that.
should have a TIT alarm set on the engine monitor.
Yeah, I didn't see an alarm, and on that graph, I don't know if you guys can see. I don't know what it did, but
Yeah.
The black
What make that
line on the top.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's a big outlier. So
At the data point, it's not. Yeah. No, it doesn't look that.
I don't think you did anything in error. I'm not implying that at all. I was just curious. You did such a phenomenal job doing everything else in our minds exactly like you should. I was just curious if you happened to note the TITs.
Spike in the middle of the cruise segment, that's where the mag failed, is that?
So it's where the that's I think
16.
so. Let's see. I'm looking at the pictures myself here too, and of course but it was when I leveled off at altitude was when I lost the mag.
So it's earlier in the flight.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I climbed to 10,000 and went lean a peak, and that's when we noticed it was rough.
So maybe that spike in the middle was the second in-flight mag check.
Yeah. Scroll. Who's moving the cursor there?
That's Ian.
Oh, Ian, very cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you I didn't realize we were active here. That's really awesome. Can you go to the middle where that peak is and maybe zoom in a little bit? You just click and then there you go. Perfect.
There you go.
So how high is the highest
that's
TIT?
It's 16 something. It doesn't, 1640.
Oh, that's not bad. That's
No,
not
it's
bad
not
at
that
all.
bad. That's probably when he did the mag
It's
check.
just short of red line, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no worries.
That is so cool. I didn't know we were live either. Then I saw the cursor moving. I said, how's that happening?
Good job, Ian.
So did we figure out why your plane was eating mags before you decided to go electronic?
Well, probably because they're pressurized mags, like Mike said.
Just because they're pressure. What were the failure modes? You said they were all different.
Well, you're taking air from the upper deck pressure, which is packed full of moisture.
Yep,
and
I understand that.
Just blowing it in there.
Pressurized slicks or pressurized?
Well, they could be either one. Do you know if you have slicks or Bendix?
I'm not sure. I think they're Bendix, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's the same problem.
Okay, because like we eat mags regularly in Dave's 550. And when Dave read this, he said it's possible that the power pulses were tearing out his mags, and maybe his prop needed to be balanced. So I wasn't immediately focusing on the pressurized. I was more focusing on mechanical failure in the mags, because they are at the other end of the crankshaft, and the vibrations in the engine get amplified like a tuning fork to the back of the engine, and they take a beating back there.
Yeah.
I know he's not pulling the same power that Dave was, but we would regularly change mags, because the crankshaft seems to kill those mags in the 550.
Yeah, well, when you're pulling 450 horsepower or something out of that 550.
Yeah, I know. No, I know it's not the same as Ray's situation, but I was wondering if he had any kind of mechanical damage in the mags, not just corrosion issues.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what they found when they. I think we just sent the mag. We replaced the mag. This last magneto, we replaced it. So
because of the power pulses in the rear of the crankshaft. That's why the magneto drive has those rubber shock absorbers in there. That
baby buggy bumpers.
You have to remember not to let drop into the engine.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on to the rubber.
Yeah, we pulled a mag. We pulled a mag on an engine a couple of weeks ago, the first time we've seen it, and one of those were missing. They've been flying like that for at least 500
Probably
hours.
sitting in the sump. not doing
It's-
any
yeah.
harm, but the mag was being driven by just one ear. I
Just
guess.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Is the Surefly have a dual mag option now? I know that
Yes.
I don't
Electro
think
Air
they
does.
do.
It does.
Well, it depends on what you mean by that. That they
No, he means a single drive.
You can replace both conventional
With
mags,
Surefly?
which is what you have with Surefly now.
Oh,
You have
okay,
to just
yeah.
install
know.
a backup battery on the firewall too.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
separate
Check out their
firewall.
website. It was the big news.
They
at
issued
Oshkosh.
that STC
I was
at
at
Oshkosh
Oshkosh.
this year. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
at
Oh,
the
that was the
Electro. I
Oshkosh.
was at Electro Air.
What
but it didn't
Surefly
do
doesn't
Surefly.
have is a yet anyway is a replacement for the DMAG.
Right.
We were talking about the last caller.
And in the
Mhm.
turbocharged installation, we still don't get any. We can't advance the timing in the
No.
Surefly.
Correct.
Yep.
Because that's based on advancing the timing at low manifold pressures, and you never have low manifold
Yeah.
pressure.
You don't ever go low.
Good. And the Electro Air system seems complex. I don't have a place on my firewall to put it because of
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's we've had our clients have had more problems with the Electro Air than they have with the Surefly.
We attempted the installation of Electro Air on a Vidito conversion. We've done quite a few of those. And we finally found a
You
way.
say you attempted it?
No, well, it wasn't finished. We were just finding a place to put a coil pack,
Yeah.
and we finally found a way to get one coil pack to mount on the firewall. There was just no place else to put it. So it doesn't seem like a good option to go with two of those.
Right.
The Sureflies, of course, are almost the exact same
Form
fit.
factor, yeah.
Yeah, form factor as a standard magneto, and works really well. The reliability seems incredibly high.
Yeah.
You don't
Well,
ever have to
the
check
other
the
thing I
timing.
kind of like about the Surefly is it doesn't have all those cables and connectors and
Yeah.
stuff. It just I whenever I see something like that with the Electro Air or even the Aerosance FADEC that Continental has, I just think, just imagine what happens if there's an exhaust leak.
Yeah.
It burns through some of those cables. What's going to happen? It's just
Yeah.
Yeah. When the parts count goes up, the reliability goes down.
yeah, and connectors are always problematic in the firewall forward because it's such a hostile environment for a connector.
Yeah, that is true.
Hmm.
Well, we're really glad that you did such a good job on your
Yeah.
in-flight troubleshooting.
Kept
Good
your head
job.
up.
And I do think a dual Surefly is your best bet. Sure.
I'll update you.
Or even
Next
just
year.
one. You can just go to one.
I know my mechanic
Yeah.
has got a straight 210. He's a great guy, almost 80, Vietnam helicopter pilot, flying a straight 210 with a Surefly on it.
Yeah.
And he likes it.
He's biased.
And you can go with one, and then you can add a second one later if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what Paul's going to do.
Yep. That's what I've been flying mine for, I don't know, 300 or 400 hours so far.
Yeah.
And
When you do that, take lots of pictures.
absolutely.
I'll do one probably almost for sure, and I might do
Yeah.
two. Who knows? I'll let you all know. I sure appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Sure.
Ray.
Bye, guys.
That's it for this episode. Hopefully, we got a couple questions right this time. We love receiving fan mail from you, and we read it all. If you have any tricky questions, send them to us. Our email is podcasts@aopa.org.
We'll see you.
Bye, everybody.